I don't feel comfortable about the sound mechanism here. But if you could hear me without the mic, I would have used it, as a matter of fact. Though I'm not in great shape today, I cannot cry, I can compete with. Yeah, phone calls will keep coming, so we'll have to, especially if my calls come. Yes, it looks like I'm getting a call. So I will switch off my phone. But I cannot ask you that favor. If you like, you can switch off your phones. Anyway, thank you all. I must begin by thanking. এখানে সামনে জায়গা আছে তো, তোমরা যারা পিছনে আসো সামনে এসে বসো। হ্যাঁ, দেশ দেমন আগে দেখতে পাচ্ছি, আসো সামনে বসো। হ্যাঁ। Hello. Is it working? Okay. I hope it works. Thank you. So first I must begin by thanking, otherwise I will forget at the end. So thanks comes to Shahnawaz Kabir, who first invited me to come to ULab as a guest speaker in a club called Return to Freud. I'm giving you not the origin of my thinking, but a place following Lakan. In the beginning, there was not time. In the beginning, there was a space. It's called Return to Freud. And then 4 years ago, I joined ULab as a full-time professor. And now after 4 years, which they have proposed originally in giving me the job, they had an expectation that I will run a center. But what center it will be, nobody knew. So a word came from heaven called theory. So it will be a center for theory. But Center for Theory is too short a name. So we were looking for an adjective. It took us 4 years to find that adjective. What kind of theory? Literary theory, psychoanalytic theory, philosophical theory. And some professors asked the question, how can there be only theory? In all modesty, I replied by saying, how can there only be philosophy? There used to be philosophy of life, philosophy of art, philosophy of science. But when people speak of philosophy as such, nobody minds. So why should we mind if someone speaks just bare, naked theory? If I had the full freedom, I would have called it naked theory. But since naked is not a word usable in a respectable university, I said advanced theory. That means theory under clothes. So anyway, we know we are all naked under our clothes, but I will be using under the clothes argument. Here, this man picture is the subject of my talk. What I did, I gave you a piece of paper, you will see. I will just go through them. There are 24 slides, including the picture. It is not a slide. The question is it a slide or not? It is a slide, but at the same time it is not. This is my talk. The unconscious is structured like a language. Take a look, my friends, here. This is a sentence in the English language. There is a subject, this much. Okay, let me see. This is the subject, the unconscious. And what is the verb? Is. And the other 4 words, structured like a language, is called an object clause. I could have said the unconscious is a language. I'm not that smart, so I became a bit foolish saying it is structured like a language. It's called an analogical argument. I'm comparing 2 things. A man is like an animal. But can I say the obverse? An animal is like a man? Not necessarily true. All men are animals. Nobody can deny, because we have anima. Anima is our soul. We move. But the contrary is not true. It is the story of contraries. On the contrary, all animals are not necessarily man. There is a genus and species problem. Here also, all language is not unconscious, by the way. But unconscious is like a language. So please keep that in mind. So my talk would be limited to 3 words only: unconscious, structure, and language. Some people argue that why do you need a language? There cannot be any language by definition which is not structured. So if I simply said that unconscious is structured, would it be sufficient? Or unconscious is like a language. But because I knew no professors will be coming here, I knew this lecture is only for students. or student-like friends. So if you permit me, I will call you my friends instead of ladies and gentlemen. So this is structured for a student audience. That's why I thought, but this sentence is not my construction. This is called an aphorism. English language is a language which I am still learning. I'm not very comfortable speaking English, but since the ULAB requires me to speak in English, so am I doing. I'm doing a job also. So here, I hope you will bear with me. If I cannot explain it in English, I will resort to Bangla at some point. I hope ULAB professors who are present will not report it. So, unconscious is structured like a language. This is a saying of Mr. Lakan, whom we are talking. I have quoted, but I omitted the quotation marks. And there is a reason why I omitted it. This man, this is from about his picture in the 1970s when he was 70-year-old. Man was born in 1901 and he died in 1981. You cannot call him very unlucky. He was lucky enough to live 80 years. But what did he do? That's where my question begins. The story begins, I'm not very familiar with using this kind of thing. You see, this split is September 1953. Lakan's story begins when he was 53 years old. How come? The man did a PhD when he was 32 years old. But all this time, he was kind of silent. In 1953, the story begins. There was a split. So you would excuse me if I use a few French terms. When Freud died in 1939, before that he already founded an association called International Psychoanalytic Association. Without knowing what is psychoanalysis, everybody was admiring Freud. Freud was, by the way, a doctor, a medical doctor. He became a psychiatrist. Then he founded a new branch or new style, which is called psychoanalysis. In as early as 1911, Freud was born in 1856. So you can guess this. When Freud was in his 50s, he founded this International Psychoanalytic Association. Why? Because if he dies, who will carry on this tradition? It is like a church, if you excuse me using that term. The Christian church, Catholic church, it was a church. And membership was regulated by strict principles. Only the educated people in medicine could be members, no one else. But Freud himself insisted that it does not need any knowledge of medicine to be a psychoanalyst. All you need to know is about mythology, about literature, and other things. In other words, you need not be a doctor. And he wrote an article in the 1920s called The Question of Lay Analysis. As you would guess, the word lay means non-clerical. In Christian tradition, clerics means religious priests. And if you're not a priest, still you can be. The question was raised much earlier. Who can pray to God? A common man can pray to God, or you need a priest to pray for you. It is like that. So the question of lay analysis, Freud wrote to say that even lay persons can be psychoanalysts. But his immediate disciples, including his own daughter, Anna Freud, they forgot this lesson. Here begins the story. Anna Freud was the reigning queen of psychoanalysis after her father's death. She never got married and she lived for 83 years. And that woman took over the legacy of the father. So Freud had many children, about 7 or 8. But only this one became interested in psychoanalysis. Others were following other careers. Just as I'll be giving you some anecdotes like that. So in 1939, when Freud died in London after exile from Vienna, the Psychoanalytic Association was taken over by his daughter and other people. In France, the reigning queen, again, is a woman. Queens are by definition women. This woman is not just an ordinary woman. Her name is Dr. Marie Bonaparte, a descendant of Napoleon, Bonaparte family. And she was married to the king of Greece, so she was a princess, and so on, many things. I do not know her entire biography. She was the president of this one, Société Psychanalytique de Paris, so, Psychoanalytic Society of Paris. You can also translate this easily. Société Psychanalytique de Paris. And Lacan was a member of that society. In 1936, he became a member in Freud's lifetime. So when Freud died, the question arose, what is psychoanalysis? Is it a church or it is a science? Should membership be regulated by certain rites of passage, entry, or by some scientific knowledge? Lakan was in favor of scientific knowledge. He says that regulation of the society should be according to strict scientific principles, knowledge and other achievements. But Freud's disciples, immediate disciples, who are known at that time as new Freudians, including his daughter, they were not in favor of giving it a scientific status. They call this, it is an art. It is like religion. So that is the point. Lacan and 5 other members of the French society were expelled. I'm making a long story short. So in 1953, they formed this new society. It's called Société Française du Psychanalyse, French Society of Psychoanalysis. And now, over them, there was an International Psychoanalytic Society. It has to give you affiliation. Lacan's association was not given affiliation, but the other one remained. This is a long story, so let's proceed. The question is this: is psychoanalysis a science? This split took place in September 1953. Lacan went to Italy. In Rome, he gave a lecture, and they founded their new society, not in France, but in Italy. And that is known as Rome Discourse or Rome Lecture. Here begins Lacan's story. Now let us see what was. Some people say that this is a quarrel among groups of doctors for personal influence. Lacan and his immediate, I will mention 2. Immediate colleague was a woman called Françoise Dolto, and there was a man called Dr. Daniel Lagache. So this was known as Lacan-Lagache group. They were expelled, 5 of them. The 2 others I don't remember. But you can always, I gave you a reference at the end of my slide presentation. You can pursue there. So who were the Freudians and new Freudians? These were Anna Freud and another man, you will know him by recognition. His name is Dr. Ernest Jones. He's an Englishman, but he wrote Freud's biggest biography in 3 volumes, Life and Works of Sigmund Freud, written by Dr. Ernest Jones. What he says, I give a quote. He says that Freud did not find a science. He was not a founder of science. What he did is this. So let me take you here. The new Freudians, their point of view is this. According to the new Freudians, then Ernest Jones, Marie Bonaparte, and Anna Freud, these are all new Freudians, and they became very influential in England and America, by the way. They founded what is called psychoanalytic establishment, is led by them, even to this day. This is American psychoanalysis. That's why Marxist thinkers in Russia rejected psychoanalysis, because it is a reactionary science. And Lacan comes from within, he says, no, all of psychoanalysis is not reactionary. Freud is not reactionary. This is the beginning of the struggle. So it is not a personal quarrel. So where is the theoretical quarrel? The question is this: is psychoanalysis a science? Lacan was in favor of answering yes. Marie Bonaparte, Ernest Jones, and Anna Freud was in favor of answering no. I'm naturally making a bit of stylistic presentation. People will dispute this characterization, but you will see. What were the new Freudians saying this? According to them, Freud, a good doctor, was lucky enough to make certain discoveries of great therapeutic value. This term, lucky enough, was used by Ernest Jones. If you want to see, go to French German Cultural Center. In the 3rd volume of his biography of Freud, you will find this term. I will give you the page number as well. So what? Freud, he said the discovery of the unconscious, which Freud claims to be his greatest discovery, he said it was a chance encounter, just an accident. So, however, then he says, though he was lucky enough to make certain discoveries, but he never really knew what he was doing. That means Freud did not know what he was doing. You remember probably Jesus Christ saying somewhere in the New Testament, oh God, they don't know what they are doing. They are throwing stones at me. They didn't know that I am the Son of God. Oh God, they don't know what they are doing. It is something like that. However, he never really knew what he was doing. And in his attempts to formulate a general theory, here comes our unfortunate theory. Our center could as well have been called Center for General Theory, but that is not chic. So, explaining what he found, involved himself in many inconsistencies, or even in such mystical flights as the notion of primordial father or of the death instinct. Bear with me, these are difficult ideas. I'm only giving them ahead of I'm putting the cart before the horses. Ernest Jones and others were saying that Freud said many things. He discovered the unconscious, but he also talked of death instinct. But probably this is later Freud, he became mad. So let us expunge this from the records. Men love their fellow human beings, men love their soul, men love to live, and men love to die also. How can that be? So they call it inconsistency. And Freud also thought that in the beginning there was a father, and children killed that father because the father was monopolizing over all women. Now after the father is killed, no son would be willing to touch their stepmother. This is what Freud wrote, Totem and Taboo, Moses and Monotheism, and other books. So they say that these are mystical flights. This thinking of Freud cannot be accepted. But his original discovery, ego, id, and superego can be accepted. So these are called, that is the meaning of this term, new. Some people might ask me, what is the meaning of new? They were Freudians, but not entirely unadulterated Freudians. They were Freud after Reformation. So they were called Neo-Freudians. Lacan rejected them. Lacan said what Freud said is right, and we have to begin from Freud, not from a church. So you see. And this is also Neo-Freudian position. Neo-Freudian said what must be preserved at all costs is not Freud's original discovery, because he also said many things inconsistent. So what should be saved are the following three things. One, the outward forms of the psychoanalytic interview. You all know psychoanalytics is known as talking cure. Some of you here took my courses on psychoanalysis here. Probably you know psychoanalytic cure is called talking cure. You don't put any medicine. That is why you don't need a doctor to treat you psychoanalytically. Yes, it is only by talking. There was a famous woman called Anna who said this. Oh, psychoanalysis, that is talking cure. So I use this word, psychoanalytic interview. Okay. If there are chairs at the front row, so people may come and here sit on the row instead of standing there. The outward forms of the psychoanalytic interview, what is outward form? Let me give you one example. It was established in the tradition that a doctor will take a patient and keep her only for 55 minutes. Interview must be ended. Lacan said no. Sometimes I need only 5 minutes, sometimes I may need to keep her 2 hours. But invariable period was established by the Neo-Freudians. Lacan revolted against that. So they said, oh, Lacan does not go by the standards of Freudian society. Lacan said, how can you determine how much time would be necessary for each particular patient? So these are some of the stylistic debates. Second, what must be preserved at all costs are one, outward forms, like the timetable, the methods of training analysis as well. Training analysis means who can become a psychoanalyst. How did Freud become a psychoanalyst? He trained himself, let us admit it for the sake of the argument. But who trained others? Freud had to give them training. So now anybody in order to become a psychoanalyst must go through a training period, sometimes 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So Lacan was, in the beginning, in French society, he was a training analyst. That means he was training other psychoanalysts. Because of Lacan's method was innovative and they were Freudian, the Neo-Freudians become angry, anxious, and even, you may say, jealous. Lacan was also, unfortunately, an intellectual. He was just not a doctor. Here's the problem. And third thing, those features of interpretation which are most mechanical and thus most easily transmitted. They made Freudian theory easy, like ego, superego, id, etc. Like I said, that is not that simple. We have to go back to the original discovery of Freud. We have to read interpretation of dreams, we have to read psychopathology of everyday life, and we have to read jokes and their relationship with the unconscious. These are the books which I teach here at ULab. Fortunately, there is no psychoanalytic association in Bangladesh, so they don't need to expel me. If I were, they would have expelled me. Okay, now let us go on feature. Now Lacan says this, the last view is totally erroneous. So here is the source of the conflict. I am still at the first stage. When did Lacan's teaching begin? In 1953. Why did it begin? Because he was expelled, so he started his own school. This would be called Freudian School of Paris. That he will do 10 years later, but he was only just teaching other psychoanalysts. So what Freud said, what Lacan says is this, Freud's attitude was always that their pursuit was scientific, and that orthodoxy and conformism were completely out of place. This is Lacan's position. He said, adhering to certain principles imposed from outside by majority rule cannot be the rule of science. Science must determine from internal need of the process. So, this is the beginning of Lacan's return to Freud. That is why Lacan was returning. That means he was making a repetition. Originally, when I am writing this paper and when I probably